Hello and welcome to this One Book, One Lincoln presentation. I'm Diane Gonzalez. The book all of Lincoln is reading and discussing this year is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. This nonfiction book revisits a shocking series of crimes in which dozens of people were murdered in cold blood. Now, this was the 17th year for the One Book, One Lincoln program, sponsored by Lincoln City Libraries. My guests today are Tori Hall, who was on the selection committee for the book. You're the assistant manager at Indigo Bridge Books and Cafe. Thank you so much for being here. And Katie Murtha is a librarian, and she's the coordinator of the One Book, One Lincoln program. Thank you both so much for being here. I want to say, for those who have not read the book yet, no spoilers today, so you are safe to watch this program. Let's talk a little bit about the process, Katie. 130 titles were nominated. How did Tori and her committee help you narrow that down?
Well, it starts with nominations, and we encourage people to nominate year-round. And then we also have a push in January because we cut off the nominations for the year at the end of January. So if you've read a good book, let the library know about it, and we'll add it to the list. Once we have the list, it goes to our cataloging department, and they go through and they look and see if we can get the books in multiple formats, because we have to have them in audiobook formats, large print formats. It's not a requirement, but it's becoming more necessary for us to have them in ebook or e-audiobook as well. So if it's out of print, if it's only published in a limited number of formats, those are some of the reasons why a book might get kind of cut off the list at that point. And so when the list is finally vetted, it's given to the selection committee, and then we just start reading, and we kind of go through the first, we had a lot this year to get through that very first meeting. So we kind of looked at things that had been given a look in the past. We kind of said, well, it had a chance already, and we set it aside, and we usually have at least 2 to 3 people read a book, and we end up, I think the first go, we've got about 5 books, and we meet every 2 weeks starting in February, and by the end of March we've kind of narrowed it down to the top 10, and then we have that final vote, and the top 3 come up, and those are the ones that are announced on Memorial Day to the public.
All right, and then the other two, we want to mention the other 2 finalists. We're also going to talk about those today. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng and Beartown by Frederick Backman. So it's quite an interesting process. Tori, have you been involved before?
This is my first year. It was really exciting. I am a huge reader, I always have been, and this gave me a chance to not only have like a major book club where I get to talk with a whole bunch of book nerds all the time about everything that we've read, but also expand my horizons and read some titles I might not have normally picked up.
Now, how many books did you read as part of the process?
I want to say maybe about 20, but I'm an overachiever. I don't think everyone read that many, but people would be talking about it. We would already have decided, no, we're not going to go forward with this one. I'm like, but I still want to give it a chance. I'll see what I think of it.
Did the process surprise you at how maybe it was contentious this year, maybe it was very smooth? Did anything surprise you?
No, I think we had a bunch of committee members with a lot of strong opinions, but also very respectful. And we were able to have very respectful conversations back and forth. Here's why I think this should be a candidate, and here's why I think it should not be a candidate. And I don't think anyone walked out with hurt feelings, which was really felt important.
That's important because it's a fun project. Let's talk first of all about the book that was chosen. It's a very serious book.
Yes.
It is nonfiction. Killers of the Flower Moon. Katie, tell us what this book is about.
So it's a period of time. It was called the Osage Reign of Terror in kind of 1920s, a little bit before that, a little bit after it. But the Osage people were pushed out of their natural lands and kept getting pushed further and further, and they ended up in a part of Oklahoma, which at the time when they ended there was not considered a desirable place to live at all. And one of the chiefs was just incredibly smart in that he put into the contract with the United States government that any mineral rights could not be sold, they could only be inherited. And shortly after they ended up in this land, oil was discovered, and all of a sudden they became one of the richest people per capita in the 1920s. And so whenever you have money, you have people that are kind of going to come in and try to take it, and that's basically what happened to them. They, there's a lot of racism going on in here too, he has accounts from the current day's newspapers, and you really get that flavor of, you know, how can these Native Americans have all this wealth, you know, when they're
They're lesser than us.
and this belief that, you know, it you know, they can't handle their money, which was another problem that they ended up having. Was the United States government passed a bill that basically said if you had more than 50% Native American blood, that you needed a guardian,
A white guardian.
to take care of your money. And so then it left itself open for abuse, and that's kind of what happens. So the story really focuses on one family, one lady, and she has siblings that mysteriously end up dead, you know, untimely deaths. One of her oldest one has like this they call it a mysterious wasting disease. They can't figure it out what it is, but what they really believe is that these people were poisoned. So, and then some people get shots. There's a family that there's an explosion, but it's the more he delves into it, the more you see that it's not just like this one family. It's this whole entire community, and it's a part of the country that still kind of has a very Wild West feel to it. And so that's where you start in with the beginnings of the FBI, because the local police forces were sometimes in cahoots with the people that are kind of behind this, or they are so afraid of what's happening that they don't want to become involved because they don't want to die. And he profiles a couple of people who did try to step up and help the Osage, and who were murdered.
Also met untimely ends.
So it's I mean, it's really fascinating. It's disturbing. I think for a lot of people, it's something that they've never even heard of. I know Tori graduated from high school in Oklahoma.
I took a year-long Oklahoma history class, and none of this was ever covered. I don't remember a single word about the systematic murder of Osage people at the hands of the white man, essentially. And it was truly appalling to be reading this now as an adult, knowing that I took an entire class and this was something that was never even touched on.
You say history is written by the winners, right? This sounds like the kind of book that's going to lend itself very well to a lot of very interesting discussion.
Yeah. Well, you know, and then the whole birth of the FBI is quite interesting too, because, and I think that's kind of timely in our discussions as well, when we talk about, you know, what's going on in the FBI right now, and can it be trusted? Do we trust our government? That type of thing. But you have J. Edgar Hoover, who comes in and he wants to have his own, you know, FBI agents that are all college educated, and they're in suits and ties, and he ends up having to rely on like a good old cowboy who was a part of the Texas Rangers, and he's the one that actually gets enough information to prosecute kind of the kingpins behind these murders. So Tom White is his name, and Tom White does not fit J. Edgar Hoover's version of who an agent, an FBI agent should be. And then it's also interesting too, because it becomes one of the very first high-profile cases for the FBI, and J. Edgar Hoover uses it as a means of establishing the FBI and its importance, and yet he doesn't give any credit to the agents that are the ones that ended up solving this crime.
And for it being nonfiction, it's a very readable book. If you're scared of nonfiction, you shouldn't be scared of this one.
Well, the author is a #1 New York Times bestseller. The Killers of the Flower Moon was chosen as one of the best books of the year. Tell us a little bit more about David Grann.
Well, he spent an awful lot of time researching this. He's a journalist by nature. He's had a best-selling book already, but he spent a great deal of time in Oklahoma researching what was going on. And I think you have the story about this family and then the trial And then the last third of the book is kind of him following up and going back and talking about his research. And I think what's even more disturbing then is several people come up to him and say, well, can you look into my grandfather? Or can you look into, this happened to my aunt? And, in a lot of cases, people were poisoned, so there's really no way of going back and looking to try to find out what exactly happened to them. But you get a sense that it's a much bigger problem than what was ever acknowledged. I think they said there were 20 deaths attributed to the Osage Reign of Terror, but really they feel it could be in the hundreds.
Well, the information I said possibly dozens, which is very disturbing indeed. Well, let's talk a little bit about the other two books that were the finalists. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng and Beartown by Fredrik Backman. And Tori, you're going to tell us about these books.
Oh my goodness. These were two of my favorite books of the year. Killers of the Flower Moon's great, don't get me wrong, but Little Fires Everywhere, Celeste Ng is a woman who grew up in Ohio, and this is set in the idyllic community of Shaker Heights, where everything is perfect and everyone has the perfect, 2.4 kids, and they all go to the perfect elementary school, and they all have their perfect PTA, and of course things are not as perfect as they really seem on the outside.
This is a novel.
It is a novel, yes. I think it was probably very heavily influenced by Celeste Ng's childhood growing up here. But a family moves to town, or it's a single mother and her daughter, and they rent an apartment from one of the very affluent, very woman about town family. The mom is like the president of the PTA and this, that, and the other thing. And this mother and her daughter start to not quite sow the seeds of dissent, but are starting to ask some questions that maybe the people in that community had never really considered, or are providing a viewpoint that hadn't been something that anyone had ever thought about before. And a crux of the story comes from, there's an adoption that takes place that happens to be a mixed race adoption. A Chinese child is adopted by a white family. And this is taking place in the late 90s, which was a time where I thought, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, I hadn't really considered it, but the viewpoint there of, is this child going to be better off with the affluent family, but without having any knowledge of her culture? Or should she stay with her mother, who will raise her with the knowledge of her culture and her people and her history? But the mother who comes to town with her daughter is just a viewpoint that no one else has seen before. And this was a book where you just want everything to work out for everyone. But that is just not how life works.
And no spoilers, as we promised. Tell us about Beartown.
So Beartown is an interesting book. It centers on a hockey team, but really hockey in this case is a kind of a metaphor for sports, and really maybe a metaphor for what we allow our sports heroes to get away with.
Or just our heroes in general.
Is this a novel or a nonfiction?
It is a novel. So it's really about a community. We have this junior league hockey team that is going to they have the semifinal game, and they win it, and they have one more game, and they're going to be the champions. And you see a community that's it's not just the hockey team that brings them together. It's a struggling economic community. So the idea that you might have this hockey team, might bring in more commerce, might bring in more people to this town that was kind of dying. You have classism. You have families that live, in the heights, and then families that live kind of down in the hollow. So there's that. They're all kind of brought together by this hockey team. And then after the semifinal game, you have an incident that really drives the town into, and people kind of choose sides. Which story are they going to believe between two of these characters? What happens between them? And so it's really kind of like a reflection on our values and our cultures as a community. What we're willing to let people get away with. Who are we going to believe? And it was interesting when we were reading it on the selection committee. We had a lot of people say, "Wow, this could be Lincoln. You just need to substitute hockey for football." And kind of the same ideas of like what you have all these hopes and dreams that are pinned on such young men in this case. Is that really fair to them?
A lot of pressure.
you know,
Yeah.
and then the views of two different coaches. You have a coach that wants to win at all cost, and another coach that really wants to stand back and let these young men develop and not push them into a situation where they might not be able to handle it. It's kind of interesting because he talks about, you know, you've got everybody kind of reports to somebody else. You know, you have the coach that reports to the general manager, and the manager has to be accountable to, you know, you have all these levels, and it's just really an interesting read. And it's interesting. It's a character-driven story, so there's multiple points of views, and you really kind of get to understand, well, why somebody might feel this way and why somebody else might feel another way. It's not. I don't think it's very preachy or moralizing.
No, I was really surprised by the substance of the story, and that there were certain passages, even disregarding the plot or the characters. Can I read a passage that I absolutely loved? So this I just thought was an inherent truth that I had never really considered. All adults have days when we feel completely drained, when we no longer know quite what we spend so much time fighting for, when reality and everyday worries overwhelm us and we wonder how much longer we're going to be able to carry on. The wonderful thing is that we can all live through far more days like that without breaking than we think. The terrible thing is that we never know exactly how many. It's like,
That's good writing.
I know. It has truths. This book has truths about the world in it, and it's a story about a sport.
They sound like fascinating books, but of course there were 130 to start with. What made these three come to the top? What qualities do they have that brought them to the final?
Well, we're always looking for something that a lot of people can identify with, and when we have so many, you know, you think, well, okay, well, this group might enjoy that, but I can't see it. Especially we find that with like genre fiction. I've always asked, well, why don't we see more sci-fi, or why don't we see more mystery?
There are just people who are going to be like, I'm not going to read it if it's sci-fi.
And so we're kind of really looking for something that's universal. We're looking for something that's discussable, and I think all of these books are very discussable. Someone told me, you know, they all have moral dilemmas where you really have to stop and take a minute and think, you know, what do I believe? What, you know, where is the truth here? And you know, and I think it's Beartown where they talk about they all want the truth to come out, but it's everybody's own truth. It's, you know, what you perceive truth to be. And I think that's very true in our society today, is everybody has their own sources of news that they go to, you know, so you're getting really skewed points of view. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think they all spoke to people. I know this one is a lot about mothers. You have these two completely different mothers. One is, you know, your artist who just, she only works to pay the bills because her whole identity is wrapped up in making art. And then you have the other mother who is all about, you know, following rules and being orderly and having a nice 401k and having a bank account, you know, and you've got these two values systems. And it's really interesting in this one because they're all teenage children. And they are all attracted to the opposite parent, which is, you know, if anybody who's ever raised kids knows that, yeah, you know, you're
grass is
no winning,
grass
right?
is always greener. Well, the sound again like great books, and you can get more information about the One Book, One Lincoln program by checking out the library's website at lincolnlibraries.org. There are some community discussions and special planning sessions coming up over the next few months. Sunday, September 16th is the first one at 2 o'clock, Bennett Martin Public Library. The topic is cross-cultural and cross-racial adoptions. So that one specifically would focus on Little Fires Everywhere. On Sunday, September 23rd at 2 p.m. at the Gear Branch Library, The History of the Osage Nation. So that is more of a closer, in-depth look at some of the topics in Killers of the Flower Moon. And then Sunday, September 30th at 2 p.m. at the Walt Branch Library, Voices of Hope. And this one deals with victims of assault and the community resources that are available for that. And I know the library wants to thank the partners who have made those possible.
Because we do have somebody for the Osage Nation when we have someone coming from the Osage Nation Historic Preservation Office. So he's going to be talking, you know, a lot about not just this period of the Osage Reign of Terror, but just, you know, their history in general, and they're linguistically, I think, related to the Omaha tribe. So So I'm interested to see. I've talked to Kylan Jacobs is his name, and he's going to be coming. I talked to him a few times, and I'm really excited to have him come and learn more about just the whole tribe in general, not just this one incident. But and he was kind of funny too when he was telling me he said his office is directly across from the Pioneer Woman's office. So I don't know if you're familiar with who the Pioneer Woman is, but he said it's a really small town in Oklahoma, and he said Pawhuska, and he said these two groups you have. It's over inundated with people now because people are coming for her, and then people are coming because of the book, and these two groups don't know why. Why else would anybody else come? So he said, I'm really interested to hear him come and talk.
Well, the library has a lot of resources available. You'll find a lot of that information on the website. Library will provide a discussion leader if you need one for your group. Again, Facebook, Twitter, email alerts. There's blogging and podcasts and lots of information available there on the website. And then it is available in just about every format that you can think of. So that makes it very accessible for lots of people. To wrap up, let's talk a little bit just about the goal of the program and why this is so beneficial for the community. Go ahead, Tori.
There's a lot of pieces that make it beneficial. I think such an important part of my belief system is that literacy is everything. And literacy is something that you learn from a very young age at the feet of your parents. And if you see your parents picking up a book and reading a book in the evening, whether it's because they want to, or whether it's because the library has said this, we've decided for you, this is the book that you should read, or we've decided for you, I guess. Then kids see that growing up, and they see that reading is something that's fun and something that you should keep doing. And then, of course, the literacy pays off because people with higher literacy rates, better school grades, better just more life successes in general. And working at Indigo Bridge, that's something too. We are staunch supporters of literacy outreach in any form. So I think putting books into the hands of parents or of adults will then put books into the hands of children as well.
It's important to foster community discussion, and I think that's one of the biggest goals of this program is to have people talk to each other about topics that they might not otherwise talk about. And I go out to a lot of book clubs and talk to a lot of book clubs, and it's always interesting to me because everybody reads it from their own point of view. Everybody connects. What makes a story worthwhile to you is the connections you find with the characters or the situations. And everybody kind of sees something differently. I know last year was The Gentleman in Moscow was our winner, and I did that all year long, and I still had two final book discussions in May. And at the very last book discussion, I had someone say to me, "Well, did you notice that everything important in this book happens on the summer solstice?" And I was like, "Really?" And I went back and I went look, and he doesn't write that. He doesn't say, today is the summer solstice. But he talks about that, and it was something I never noticed. I never connected. So it was fun for me to have somebody point that out to me, even if it was the very last time I discussed that book.
I'm gonna have to read it again to find that.
Everybody picks up on different things. That makes it very interesting. Well, Tori and Katie, thank you so much for being here and talking about these great books. We want to encourage everyone to read Killers of the Flower Moon, Little Fires Everywhere, and Bear Town, all part of One Book, One Lincoln. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Diane Gonzalez, and again, thank you for joining us for this One Book, One Lincoln presentation.